Welcome everyone to Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. Thank you for attending, and we hope you are having a great conference. Right now, I'd like to introduce to you Mahmoud Aleryan, and Mahmoud will be presenting a great session titled Extend Your Office 365 Collaboration to External Partners. Mahmoud, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Um, Thanks, Mike, for the introduction. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. You're all good.
Yeah. So, okay. Thanks, Mike, for the introduction. And first of all, I would like to start with big thanks to everyone who contributed to the organization of the event. A lot of effort has been done to make this possible, considering the current situation. And as you all know, also special thanks to everyone who joined the event and make himself available to spend this 1 or 2 days or 1 hour based on preference if you attended the whole 2 days or just a few sessions. Many thanks, and hopefully I can share something valuable for you and you can benefit from it in your daily work or in your daily business. My name is Mahmoud Aleryan. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Mahmoud Aleryan and originally from Egypt, and I'm working since 14 years with Microsoft Technologies since SharePoint 2007 and WSS and most if you heard about this from before the cloud area and Office 365. Currently working as IT solutions architect at Avanet Deutschland in Germany. My main area of expertise is mainly on the Office 365 web development, SharePoint Online, including the latest technologies from Microsoft based on Power Platform and Azure platform as well. I'm Microsoft Solutions Architect certified. Also, I have the Azure Administrator Associate and Teams Administrator certificate as well. And my pleasure to be with you all here. Our session for also here is my LinkedIn profile. Would be my pleasure to connect with you all. Yeah, to have you all part of my network. Our session for today is to how to extend the Office 365 collaboration capabilities to external partners or users or supplier, however you call them in your organization. Our agenda for today, we will have a quick look on the external sharing capabilities coming from SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business as well. We'll have a quick look on the Azure B2B and guest access and discuss together what could be important to know when it comes to external collaboration for the services part of Office 365. And also the capabilities coming for external collaboration part of Microsoft Teams. As you all know, when everyone moved to the cloud and they started using Office 365 collaboration tools, there is a plenty of tools which you can benefit in your organization from Office 365. For example, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, Planner, Tasks, all these kind of collaboration tools which you can benefit from. Everything works perfect when it comes to internal users in your organization, as long as they are part of the same tenant. They have access to everything. You can share content between the different users without any issues. Seamless SSO. If you have hybrid deployment with on-premises Active Directory, the user can use the same username and password, and everything works perfect. But then when you start more and more using the cloud services, and mainly if you are on daily basis or the users from your organization deal with external partners, then here comes the question, how can, as an IT department, we allow the external users to get access to the Office 365 content from our tenant, in this case, in a secure way? In our session for today, we will focus on the SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Microsoft Teams. For sure, there is a similar content related to other services, part of Office 365 like Planner, like Stream in the near future. Currently, it's not supporting sharing externally, but it could be in, I think it's part of the roadmap. But our main focus for today will be on SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business and Microsoft Teams. For SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business, for any SharePoint Online admin part of this event, he knows this screen where you can go to the SharePoint Online Admin Center and you would like to configure the sharing configurations for the users. to whom should they be able to share content with externals. As you see here, we have 4 different levels. For sure, the first one here, only people in your organization, and from its naming, we know if you have this all the settings for SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business to this level, this means that any user within your organization can only share content to the users part of the same organization. You cannot share it with any external user. There are other 3 levels starting from top, anyone, which means you can share the content with anyone. Okay, anyone from outside of your organization. And I will show you later what will be the end user experience for it. There are 2 other options related to the guest access, which is existing external users, which means that SharePoint users or the users of the or owners of the content part of SharePoint Online team sites or any kind of content on SharePoint Online part of your tenant or an owner of OneDrive for Business folder will be able to share only content with external users who already part of the organization directory. And you will see later in the slides or in the demo how to invite an external user to the organization Azure Active Directory. In addition to that, there is another option, new and existing external users, which means as a SharePoint site owner or a member of a SharePoint site, I can invite one of the existing external users who already part of the Azure Active Directory tenant, or I invite another user who's still not part of the tenant. Technical background for these 2 options, the existing external users is mainly handled by the Azure B2B. It assumes that the tenant is already configured for external collaboration based on Azure B2B. And for the first one, new and existing external users, it's based on SharePoint Invitation Manager. And this invitation engine or manager was already available part of SharePoint Online before the availability of the Azure B2B capabilities. If you configure the Office 365 the SharePoint Online tenant to allow the users to share content to everyone, as I explained, anyone who has this link can access the file or the folder if you're sharing a file or a folder without having to sign in or provide any kind of verification. It's something like anonymous. You share a folder with everyone who has the link can get access to this folder or file. Even if someone who received the invitation or the sharing notification via email forward the notification to another colleague, then the other user also will be able to access the content. One point here that you can set for sharing link expiry period, which means maybe after 2 weeks or few days, this link will be expired, which means that everyone who will try to access the link one more time will not be able to access. This is something you can use just as a part of content protection or governance, for example. And you can set a default value for link expiration on the tenant level. We will see this later in the demo. Also, as you cannot verify the user, you cannot verify its identity, but part of the logs, which should be tracked part of Office 365, you can find some information like the IP address, which will be recorded in the audit logs. Okay. Maybe you can audit it later for some sort of IT governance or security checks, for example. Also, the users who will be logging using this link, they will not be available into the Azure Active Directory. You will not, as an IT administrator, you will not have visibility on the users in the Azure Active Directory. So this is in brief the anyone sharing with anyone experience. The next external sharing option, which as I explained before, new and existing external users, this is how the end user experience will look like. As a content owner part of SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business, if you share a folder with someone who is not part of the organization, he will receive an email with a notification, hey, this folder demo has been shared with you, click here to access the file, for example. Okay, he will click on this link, then he will be prompted to log in either using his Microsoft account. Microsoft account means could be Outlook, could be Hotmail, any of these consumer domains here. Or if he already has, he or she has Office 365, he still can use it to log into the content from your organization. Once the user accepts the invitation and click on the redemption link mentioned in the invitation, then there will be a new user added to the Azure Active Directory on your tenant, and you will find that the user's type is guest, and we will see this in the demo. The next option for sharing with external users is existing external users, which means you prevent SharePoint Online users or OneDrive for Business users from inviting new users, but you can only invite the users who already part of the Azure Active Directory, who already invited before. This scenario could be helpful in some cases. Some IT organization, due to governance or security requirements, would be interested to implement a pre-approval process for inviting external users, for example. So it will go into collect some information from the user of the organization who invites the external one. Maybe it goes into an approval process, direct manager or security department, for example. Once it's approved, you can implement your own custom solution to invite the user from Azure Active Directory, or you can use the Azure Active Directory portal to invite the user. Once the invitation is created on the Azure Active Directory, either from the portal or from a custom solution, an invitation will be sent to the guest user with a link to accept the invitation. Once the external user accepts the invitation, the user will be marked as invitation accepted in Azure Active Directory. Then the user will be able, the organization users will be able to grant this user access to the different content from SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, or Microsoft Teams later. Also, one difference between the guest access from Azure B2B and the previous SharePoint Invitation Manager, which we mentioned, for Azure B2B account, once the account is created in Azure Active Directory, the user can be invited to the different SharePoint sites without sending the invitation one more time, because the user already exists in the Azure Active Directory. But if you use new and existing external users similar to before, when you share the user, each time he will receive an invitation coming from SharePoint Invitation Manager, which in some cases not the best end user experience. Also, one point to mention here, the invitation which is being sent to the external user, Microsoft provide the technical capabilities to allow you as an IT department to customize the invitation which is being sent to the user. Maybe apply some branding, apply adding additional links for privacy, terms of use, that the user can read it before accepting the invitation, for example. But if you use the previous one, you don't have the capability to customize this notification template. It will be always like this, and you don't have the ability to change it if you use this option. Who are the users who can be invited part of Azure B2B? If you are using Azure B2B, you can invite the following users from the external organizations. Assuming that you are using Office 365 and the external organization as well is using Office 365, you can invite them. Then technically there will be a trust established between the two different tenants, and the external user, in our case we call it guest now, will be able to log into the content from the internal organization using the same username and password in a seamless SSO, okay, as it looks like a site part of their organization as well. If they don't have an Office 365, the user will either he already has a Microsoft account coming from Outlook, Hotmail, or something like this. He can use it also to log into Office 365. But if the user does not have Microsoft account, he will have the option to create a new Microsoft account. For example, if he's coming from Yahoo or Gmail, he can create a new Microsoft account using the same email address. But for sure, it's not the best end user experience because he needs to maintain the username and password for this account as an additional account. Okay. Also, for Azure B2B, Microsoft gave the possibility to have a Google Federation, which means also using your Gmail account to log into Office 365 without creating a Microsoft account from before, but this option will be available for the users if this is already being enabled on the tenant level. If the user does not want to create an account or log in with a username and password, you can have something called one-time passcode, where the user will receive the invitation via email, and when he clicks on the link to the SharePoint, he will be asked to write a verification code, which will be sent to his or her email address. He will receive it, he write his email address, he will receive it via email, then he can log into the SharePoint site using this one-time passcode. Another option which is still in preview, direct federation, and this is mainly for the external organizations who do not have still cloud identity in Azure Active Directory. For example, if they are relying on premises ADFS server or any other identity provider, you can implement direct federation with the on-premises solution from the external organization. And all these options, as an IT admin, you will have the full control which option to enable on the Azure Active Directory of your tenant. Okay, so time for a demo. Let's have a look about all these different settings. Okay, let me open the browser. So this is my dev tenant. So in order to access the sharing settings, you have here policies, click on sharing. Here you have the same screen which we had in the PowerPoint slides, which you can have here the full control, which sharing options which you can enable for the organization users. For example, if it's only people in your organization, then you cannot share with any external user. If it's existing users, then it's only users coming from the guest accounts. And one point to mention here that for OneDrive for Business, it cannot be higher more than the SharePoint sharing settings. For example, here I have here existing guests. I cannot change OneDrive for Business to new and existing guest users, but the other way I can do easily. For example, I can make the SharePoint. For SharePoint Online, I can make it for anyone, but for OneDrive for Business, I make it only for existing users. And as more you choose from the different settings here, additional settings appear below it to give you more control about it. For example, here you have here limit external sharing by domain. Okay, as an IT admin, you can specify here which domains the users can grant or can invite users from. Okay, either as a whitelisting, so you allow only specific domains, or you can say anyone coming from this domain cannot be invited to our tenant. Could be due to as a competitor in the market or something, and you need to make sure as an IT that even by mistake, if the user is inviting someone and he writes the domain by mistake, he cannot invite user from this allowed domain. If we change it to anyone and we go to again to this limit external sharing and add domain, you see here that you see these limitations for allow or block specific domains does not apply when you are using or when the users will be sharing with anyone, because from definition it's with anyone. Okay. The same will be applied for OneDrive for Business. If you go to OneDrive for Business here to the admin center, go to sharing section here as well, you will have a similar experience here where you can control the sharing levels from for OneDrive for Business as well. This is mainly for the first for these options, anyone, new and existing external users, and only people in your organization as well. How to control or how to enable existing external users option in our case we call it guest users. This is being managed from the Azure Active Directory. As a global administrator or as a tenant admin, you need to enable it first on the Azure Active Directory to allow the tenant users or a specific people to invite users from external organizations. You can reach this point by clicking in users and I believe in user settings and manage external collaboration settings. This is the section where you control the external collaboration settings for the guest users. From this screen, you see here, these are different options which you can turn on or off based on your preference. For example, manage guest users permissions are limited. If you make this on, you are limiting the permissions from guest users. For example, they will not be able to get list of all users from the Azure Active Directory of your tenant as well. For example, okay, if you make it no, and this guest user will go to portal.azure.com, for example, he will be able to see list of all users of your tenant. For some IT organizations, they would like to prevent such kind of issues, so you can turn it like yes with limited access. Also, another option which can give you as an give the IT control over the invitation to external users, that you can limit the invitation to external users to a specific group of users. Here, admin and users in the guest invite rule can invite. Okay, if you make it yes, this means that you can limit to a specific user or group of users who should be able to invite external users. This option is important in the case if you would like to implement a custom solution, for example, or you implement a process to have a pre-approval in advance, okay, before inviting external users. For example, you can limit the help desk team to be only the group of users who can invite external users. You can limit it to a specific service account if you have an automated solution who should be able to invite external users. In this case, you can limit this, make it as yes. If you make it as no, anyone in your organization, if he goes to the SharePoint Online or Teams and write an email address of a user who's still not part of the Azure Active Directory, will be able to invite this external user. Also here, members can invite any user within your Active Directory, can invite or not. This is something you can control as an IT department. And also if you should allow the guest users to invite other external users from other organizations. So this is something you can enable or disable as well. And here the option for the one-time passcode, if you allow the users to log in using the one-time passcode or not. This is still in preview. And here also similar control capabilities which you can use to control the type of guest users who should have access to the Office 365 tenant. For example, here allow invitation to be sent to any domain or deny invitation to specific domains. And here you specify the domains xyz.com, for example. Okay, you specify here the domains which should be blacklisted from your tenant, or you allow only invitations to a specific domain, for example. As you see here, we have also whitelisting and blacklisting as well, and on SharePoint Online we have the same feature. So you would say which one to use. Microsoft recommendation is to keep both of them consistent in sync. You know, so if you set a domain in Azure Active Directory, please make sure to add it also into the SharePoint Online admin tenant as well. From practical experience, number of domains which can be added to Azure Active Directory is different than number of domains which can be added to SharePoint Online. So you need to consider the limitation when you are planning whitelisting or blacklisting. How to invite an external user from Azure Active Directory? You simply go to the Users tab. And here you have, instead of creating a new user, part of your tenant, you can just select here new guest user. And the new guest user, you can just write here Ahmed Ali, and you write here ahmed@yahoo.com, for example. Okay, give him a first name, last name, write the personal message, and click invite. For the sake of demo, I already had an invitation which was sent from before. Let me show it to you. this one here. Yeah, here, this is the invitation of the user. Okay, sender, this is the name of the user who invited the external account from which organization and the domain of the organization with a link to accept the invitation, or you block further invitation from this organization. As I mentioned from before, if you are interested to customize this invitation message, you have the full control over this. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you back now. You were out for a bit.
For how long? Was it long?
Just like 4 or 5 seconds, but you're back.
Okay. Okay. So maybe let me repeat the last section. So this was a sample. Can you still see my screen? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So after we invited the user from Azure Active Directory, specifying the username, email address, the user as per the flow which we showed in the PowerPoint slides. The user will receive an invitation email which include a link to accept the invitation or the option to block future invitations from this organization. Okay, as we mentioned in the slides, as an IT department, you can implement your own custom branding or changes to the notification email, not similar to the SharePoint Online Invitation Manager. Once the user click on accept invitation, the user will be visible into the Azure Active Directory, and you see here for internal users, it's shown as from the user type, it's shown as a member, but for external users, it's shown as guest. Okay, and this is already a user who accepted the invitation from before. Let me open it. You see here there is a status called invitation accepted. If the user redeemed the invitation and accepted, then the user will be marked here as invitation accepted. Maybe if the user would complain, I didn't receive the invitation, you will have here the option to resend the invitation one more time. For a user who didn't accept the invitation yet, let me check the email address. I didn't accept this one. It was, yeah, let's search by this email address. Hopefully I still have it, did not deleted. Yeah, it's a guest account, as you see. And the invitation status, it's accepted. It seems that I clicked on the link in this link before, but usually if you didn't accept the invitation, it will be something like waiting, accepting the invitation or something like this, that you can track later who accepted the invitation or not, or if you would be, if you would need to resend the invitation one more time. One important point to mention here, since this account now is a user within the Azure Active Directory, this means that you can enforce some conditional access policies from Azure Active Directory. For example, enforcing multi-factor authentication. Okay, for example, enforcing accepting terms of use, or for example, allowing the external users to access only a specific set of applications. So you can allow them to access only SharePoint and OneDrive, but do not access Teams, for example. So you will have the full capabilities of conditional access policies coming from Azure Active Directory that you can secure the applications or the content. One additional point to mention, this guest access or external users who have been created or who has been created in Azure Active Directory, later, if required, you can allow this user to access on-premises solutions as well. But this is a different topic which you need to plan separately, because this could be requiring Azure Application Proxy and such kind of configurations. Okay, so this was a quick demo how to enable external sharing either from SharePoint Online using the other options, anyone or new and existing users, or using Azure B2B as well. There was a question in the chat window about when an external user is added to the company Azure Active, does it count against 5 to 1 guest license that are allowed by Microsoft? Yes, if you are inviting an external user from Azure Active Directory, in this case, it's counted as B2B, and it will be counted for each one paid license you have. You can invite up to 5 external users. But if you are inviting the user using the SharePoint Online Invitation Manager, it does not have this limitation. Okay, this limitation does not count, and it's not limited to this number. There is a question, will it be possible to block external user access until it's approved internally? So external user received an invitation but have to wait for internal approval like legal department or security. If this is a business requirement or security requirement, I would plan it differently, which means I invite the user, but I don't send the invitation email. And this is something you can technically implement using the Graph APIs. You can invite an external user being marked into the Azure Active Directory, but the invitation will not be sent to the external user until it's being approved. This could be a possibility. Another possibility could be before even sending the invitation, I implement a solution, maybe using Microsoft Flow or Logic Apps, for example, to take this request into approval process. Once it's approved, I invite the user technically using a functional account or via the help desk, for example, then the invitation will be done to the user. But if you are asking specifically to block the user even getting the invitation email, up to my knowledge, I'm not aware that this can be done from Azure Active Directory. Okay, or what you can do from this is just came to my mind now. There are some PowerShell commands that you can block sign in for a specific user. So maybe you can evaluate something like this to achieve the same objective. So these are different different implementation approaches which can use to achieve your goal. Hopefully this answers your question. Okay. So, okay. The next point was the licensing model. As I just mentioned, for Azure B2B accounts, you are limited to 1 to 5 based on the number of paid licenses. For example, if you purchased 10 Office 365 licenses, you are limited to invite up to 50 in this case, external user. But if the business would require to invite more, what you need to do to purchase additional licenses. So for example, if you would like to invite additional 500, you will need to purchase additional 100 Office 365 licenses. But even if you don't have additional license, the users can benefit from free Azure Active Directory features, but they cannot log into SharePoint Online, for example. And here is a link which explains different examples of the licensing scenarios for B2B. Okay, so here is a summary of the governance capabilities which you can achieve as an IT department, some sort of data protection if you are utilizing guest access from Azure B2B. As we explained, as a tenant admin or as an IT department, you can implement a predefined process for guest users invitation, which you can take the users into invitation into approval process. Tenant admins can control which domains to be whitelisted, which domains to be blacklisted. Tenant admins can apply custom branding to the invitation email, and this is an important requirement for some clients, because sometimes they will think, oh, if I receive an invitation without information about this organization, I can think it's like a phishing email or a spam, and I can just delete it. So some organization are interested to have some sort of branding or some sort of links to terms of use before the user accept the invitation. Also, as explained, Azure Active Directory conditional access policies can be applied to guest users, but to be specific, not all or not 100% of the conditional access policies can be applied, but most of them can be applied successfully without any issues. Here is a sorry. Here is a summary comparison between the different sharing capabilities for SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business. For example, here for guest access or guest accounts using B2B accounts, you can implement a proper governance controls by implementing maybe a predefined approval process for the accounts creation for new and existing external users as well. This can be achieved, for example, also whitelisting, blacklisting the different domains. You can have a proper control on the life cycle management of the accounts by implementing an automated process for the provisioning flow. If you are using SharePoint Invitation Manager, there is no technical API which can help you to achieve this, but for Azure B2B, there are plenty of APIs available. The famous one is the Graph APIs and PowerShell as well. You can use it to invite external user and send the invitation email. Custom invitation branding, it can be only applied in case of Azure B2B and guest accounts, but it cannot be applied in SharePoint Online Invitation Manager. There are available APIs which you can use to automate the provisioning process in case of Azure B2B, but it's not possible in case you use the SharePoint Online Invitation Manager or you rely on anyone. For sure, these are just, you need to consider also the licensing part. For Azure B2B, you need to be planning the proper licenses for the external users, as we just explained, 1:5 ratio or 5:1 ratio. But for SharePoint Online Invitation Manager, there is no, this limitation does not apply. Okay, so the next part in our session today is about Microsoft Teams, how to enable also external collaboration or external access on Microsoft Teams. For everyone who is coming from the Skype for Business application before the Teams availability, there was something called Skype for Business Federation, okay, which means as an organization A, I can speak, or I can, users from organization A can make calls or check the availability of users from organization B as well, okay? And this is limited only to voice call or video calls. And this is what's meant by the external access. And this is available similarly in Microsoft Teams. And as a Teams admin, you will have the ability to enable this or not, and we'll see this later in the demos. And also you can set whitelisting or blacklisting for a specific domains to allow the users to communicate between the different organizations. With the introduction of Teams, Microsoft also extended the Teams capabilities to invite external users as well to Teams for more collaboration. For example, contributing in discussions. You know, all of you knows the capabilities or the features from Microsoft Teams, for example, contributing in different channels, creating posts, all this kind of stuff. And in order to invite a guest user to benefit from these features, it should be invited, the user should be invited as a guest, not as an external user. What are the features available in each of these options? This is a link from Microsoft, which lists these limitations in details. Yeah, I think this one. Yeah. If you see this table here, you see external guest users, just similar to Skype Federation, and the guest access users, and which kind of features they can benefit from. For example, here, individual user can be blocked. This is not available in external access, but this will be available only in case of you are relying on guest access users. At mention, similar to the discussions in Microsoft Teams, you can mention a user. This can be achieved in both. Make private calls. This is possible in both as well. And here user can access Teams resources, for example, files coming from SharePoint or not. This is only available in case you invite the user as a guest, not as an external user. Okay, and this link I will share later in the slides that you can know the differences between them. Before you enable the guest access on Microsoft Teams, you need to understand the architecture of Microsoft Teams client, because Teams client or Teams service is simply an integration point between many different services, part of Office 365. For example, here you see the files being stored on the different channels of Microsoft of a created team. It can be stored in OneDrive for Business in case of one-to-one chat, or it can be stored within a SharePoint online site, which is related to the created team or being referenced as a document library. Also, the tasks which is being created in Teams will be stored in Planner. The discussions and the chat between the different users will be stored in the mailbox of the Office 365 group related to Microsoft Teams. The meetings, the same way, it's being stored in the Exchange Online, and the recording of the different meetings will be stored in Microsoft Stream. Why I'm showing this picture here in this slide, because when you decide to enable external or guest access on Microsoft Teams, you need to consider enabling it on the related services. For example, if you enable external sharing on the Microsoft team level of a 365 group in this case, but you don't enable this on the SharePoint online site, the guest user will be able to log into the Microsoft team, contribute in the discussions, but if he clicks on the files tab from the Microsoft team, he will not be able to access the content because the external sharing for the SharePoint online site, the related SharePoint online site, is not enabled. Similarly, if you have one-to-one chat between an internal user or an external guest user and they share files between them, he will not be able to access the content because external sharing is not enabled for OneDrive for Business. Okay, so the message here, if you plan to enable guest access on Microsoft Teams, please consider enabling it on all the related services, that the user does not have any issues when accessing the content. Okay. Due to the dependency between Microsoft Teams and all the other Office 365 services, when you are inviting an external user, okay, then it will check, okay, is external sharing enabled on the Office 365 group or not? If it's enabled, then the guest user will receive the invitation for authentication. If not, the guest addition will be denied because it's not enabled on the Office 365 group. If it's enabled, the user will authenticate using his username and password. Then if he's trying to access a SharePoint online site or a file uploaded to the related SharePoint online site, but external sharing is not enabled, then he will get access denied because you need to enable external sharing on the related SharePoint online site in order to be access files, notes, and wiki, and the content which is uploaded to the SharePoint online site. Similarly, if you would like to enable the user to add the user to a specific Office 365 group, if it's not enabled, then the user cannot be added, and you can control this. So this is the authentication flow which you need, which is being present because the dependency on the different Office 365 services. To manage the external sharing for Microsoft Teams, there are available APIs which you can use. For example, this Graph API here, if we go to this link. So if you are familiar with Graph API, this is the updated group settings because Microsoft Teams mainly relies on Office 365 groups. So if you enable the external sharing on the group level, then it will be enabled onto the related Microsoft team. And you see here allowed, and this is the property which you need to enable or disable using the Graph API, allowed to add guests. If you make it true, then as a team owner, I can invite external users. If false, I cannot invite guest users. Similarly, this can be controlled using PowerShell, and this is a reference to some sample PowerShell commands. Let's go for a quick demo how to control the guest access or external access for the teams. This can be controlled from the Teams admin center. And in org-wide settings, there are two settings shown here, external access, and this is what we meant similar to the Skype for Business federations, and this is if you refer to the link or the table which we discussed before, based on the features which should be available, you can enable the external access, or you can rely on the guest access. And for guest access, if you make it enable, you can control it on or off overall for Teams. So if you make it on, then you can allow as an IT admin having private calls between the organization user and the guest users or not, if they should have video calls or not between both of them, if they can have if they have the ability to delete sent messages or not, and these are different configurations which you can control and you can enforce based on to be applied on the guest access. Similarly to the external access, similar to SharePoint, you can allow here allowed or blocked domains. For guest access, the domains are coming from the Azure Active Directory. In order to have a whitelisted or blacklisted domains, it's being inherited from Azure Active Directory settings. When you have the guest access enabled by default on the tenant level, when creating a new team, it will be enabled by default. So maybe you can say, or you plan this in your organization when creating a new team to make sure that it's not enabled for external guest access unless there is a request which is being raised maybe to the help desk or something like this to enable external access. How it will look like for inviting an external user into team. So this is the web interface of Microsoft Teams. Similarly, you will have in the Windows client. So this is a sample team which I created. What you have in order to invite a new guest user, add a member, and you write here the email. This one, for example, okay. If I search for this email now, this user is not part of my organization, but because it's already exists in the Azure Active Directory, I can select the external user and give him access to this selected team. If you allow the users or allow the member, if you remember the setting which we saw in the Azure Active Directory to allow members to invite guest users, you can write any email here, demo.com, and it will realize, okay, this account does not exist in the Azure Active Directory. There will be an option to invite an external user. Once you click invite, there will be an invitation email which will be sent to the external user. The same flow will be applied to accept the invitation, and then the user will receive an email that he has been added to this team. I already have a sample notification email here. After I added this user as a member to this team, then you will receive this invitation that you have been added to this Microsoft team as a member. And he will use Teams similar to internal users, but as a team admin, as a team member, you can also control the permissions of the guest users on the created team. For example, you can control if you should allow guest users to create or change the configurations of the created channels or not, or you allow or disallow the guest user to delete channels. So this is something as a team owner you can control on the individual team level. Okay. I believe that was all from my side. I see one question in the chat window. Tenant admin can implement a predefined process for guest accounts creation before granting access to any content. Is this what I'm looking for? Have some kind of validation prior to the access is given. Any content is this? I believe yes, you can have you can implement this process in advance in an approval process maybe via the help desk or via a custom solution implemented using Microsoft Flow or any kind of automation tools. Once it's approved, you can trigger the invitation automatically using some of the existing APIs, maybe using PowerShell commands or using Graph APIs, or instructing the help desk to send the invitation manually. This can be done. Yes. Any other questions? If not, many thanks for your time. It was my pleasure to be part of this event with you. Don't forget to visit the vendors booth and watch the videos. Submit your answers to enter the raffle. Here is the link as a reminder, and these are the prizes which you can win if you are lucky. And many thanks for your time. Thanks again for Mike for your effort for managing the session. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.